Series. Hopefully you guys watched the first one, and so I'll be referring to a little bit of that just because of zone 2, because we're now going to just focus on exercise today, which is, and I've talked about this before, it is literally the most powerful longevity drug we have. And so I've talked about this a lot on other talks, but then today we're going to really talk about some statistics. So it's going to be a little bit boring in the beginning just with the statistics of it all. And again, it's all based on this book, okay? So most of the information's coming from there. So if you need to refer to it so you know that I'm actually telling the truth, that's what it's coming from. And so it's just going to really show how important it is. So I've said before, I always thought, and I still am not dismissing nutrition at all, and nor is Dr. Attia. It's just in terms of longevity. If you want to live a long, healthy life versus just a long life, but a healthy life, you have to be strong. So you have to have a VO2 ability to do some stuff that you want to do when you're 80 years old, and that matters what you do today for that. And then you have to be strong enough to support your body and do the stuff you want. So in terms of longevity, it is absolutely the most important thing, our most important drug that we have in terms of helping us live a long, healthy life. So remember we talked about health span versus lifespan last time. So I think most of us, I think every single person on the planet would choose, I would rather be done at 70 if I knew my last 20 years were going to be this long, slow, painful death. So longevity or lifespan is how long do you live, but health span is really how well do you live. And so I think, again, most of us or all of us would choose, I would rather live, and we talked about that the other day, I'd rather live till I'm 90, or what Jack LaLanne did, live till he was 96 and literally fell off a cliff. So that's what I want. So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I'm trying to help people understand. So today it's all about exercise. And so with exercise, it's just a couple of points there. It delays the onset of chronic disease. So we talked about that the other day, the 4 horsemen that he talks about. So make sure if you listen to that. So I'm not going to go over all that stuff again, so I'm not boring you. Amazingly effective extending and improving our health span, which I just talked about, and reversing. So you can literally stop the process a little bit and reverse that physical decline that we all are going through, right? And so for me, especially, most people in this gym, but it's just become more apparent the older I get, every year, week, sometimes days, you're like, oh my God, it's amazing the difference. So we're all fighting a fight, and so trying to delay that and trying to live the best life we can. So we can physically reverse decline and also the slowing and reversing of cognitive decline. So I am going to talk about that as well today, that exercise actually helps you, with your cognitive function and Alzheimer's and all that kind of stuff. And we talked about that as one of the 4 horsemen last time. So while it is the most powerful drug we can take, meaning exercise, 77% of the US population does not exercise, which is just frightening. 77%, right? So I live in a world where most people I know exercise, but you go outside of these 4 walls and you just have to look around and you can tell that most people do not. So you guys are all doing way more than 77% of the population, which is just frightening. But then, when you're trying to talk to that person and go, if you just even went for a walk, in the beginning, walking is just enough. You just going for a walk for 90 minutes a week reduces your risk of dying from all causes by 14%. No drug, no medical drug, actual drug, can do that, can decrease your lifespan or increase your lifespan and decrease your risk of dying. So we're going to talk about VO2. So we've talked about that with zone 2. So I'm not going to repeat zone 2 unless you have any specific questions while I'm talking. By all means, just stop me. But we talked at length at zone 2. So I wanted to make sure, just because zone 2 is part of the challenge, that we had a good understanding so that, not 3 weeks or 4 weeks in that I started talking about it. So I've talked a lot about it, so hopefully everybody understands what zone 2 is. But VO2, so we have talked a little bit about it, but I'm going to just go into what that means. So VO2 is the maximum rate at which a person can utilize oxygen. The more oxygen your body can use, the higher your VO2 max, the higher your cardiorespiratory fitness. So we talk about that, or I talk about that in here, about VO2. So it really is. So the higher you are, the more fit you are, the better you can utilize oxygen, which means that's why you can do hard things or harder things than some other people. So if you watch, Kale just did this 30-minute WOD where he was just running for 30 entire minutes all over the place. he's got a really high VO2 max. And so he can do most stuff that most people can't do because he's working at that high elite level in terms of fitness. So the higher we are, and then the higher we are today, is going to matter, as we're going to talk about as we get older. So the higher your VO2, the more work you can do. An average 45-year-old male will have a VO2 max of around 40. So this is average. This is not like the person that's working at any kind of elite or high-level fitness. So around 40 mils per kilogram per minute. So that's just how they measure it, okay? An elite endurance athlete will likely score in the high 60s and above, and then an unfit person in their 30s and 40s, which is, again, sadly, most of us, might only score in the high 20s. And so where that becomes relevant is, and I'll talk about that in a little while, is we decline by about 10% per decade of our life after about age 30. So then if you think you're in your 20s in terms of VO2 max when you're in your 30s and 40s, imagine what that's going to look like when you're in your 80s or 70s, if you even make it that far when you're only in your 20s at 30 and 40. You won't be able to do very much. And that's what you see when you look around and you see the people aging around us that have the walkers and have the wheelchairs and are in, assisted living facilities long before they should be. So a person's VO2 max is highly correlated with longevity. A study was done, and there's numerous studies, but I'm just giving you a couple of studies here. A study was done in 2018 of 120,000 people, found that the higher the VO2 max was associated with lower mortality across the board. The fittest people had the lowest mortality rate. So it's just directly correlating that the fitter you are, the longer you are going to live. But this little thing here was like pretty interesting to me. A person who smokes has a 40% greater risk of all-cause mortality, which is the risk of dying at any moment, than someone who does not smoke. And I think everybody in here would be like, yeah, I agree with that. That's pretty true, right? We all know we shouldn't smoke. Very dangerous, causes cancer. So someone with a below average VO2 max for their age and sex, because it is really based on male, female, and how old you are, because like I told you, as you get older, your VO2 max starts to decline. So someone with below average VO2 max for their age and sex, so between the 25th and 50th percentile, so this isn't the worst of the worst, this is between the below average people, is at double the risk of all-cause mortality compared to someone at the top quartile, which is the 75th to 95th, so like the highest level, right? This means that poor cardiorespiratory fitness, or VO2, carries a greater risk of death than smoking. So that was pretty stunning, and so then there's even more that I'm going to talk about here, but think about that. So we all would be like, yeah, you're not supposed to smoke, it's terrible for you, and you're going to get lung cancer or emphysema or whatever and die an early death. But the studies have shown, and it's pretty dramatic in terms of how at risk you are when you have a low VO2. So if you are below, and this isn't even, like I said, this isn't the bottom 25%, 25 to 50th percentile means that you're likely going to die quicker and all different kinds of causes compared to smoking. So put that in your pipe. A few more VO2 stats for you just to understand the importance of exercise. So someone in the bottom quartile, so that's the 0 to 25%, is nearly 4 times likelier to die of all causes, like we talked about, than someone in the top quartile. So then if you're just taking away the smokers, and we're just dealing with VO2 people, so if I'm in the top quartile and Kathy's in the bottom, she is 4 times more likely to die of some different types of causes, or of all causes, sorry, than me. And then if I was in the top quartile, so Kale would probably be a person that'd be like in that very top 2.3%, then I'm 5 times, or she's 5 times likelier to die of all causes compared to him. Like, that's stunning. Those are stunning numbers, right? Increasing your fitness to 25 to 50%, so again, below, cuts your risk nearly in half. So when you think, okay, what can I do? Like, just by increasing your fitness, so if you were below 25%, so getting it to 25 to 50%, which means you're not like in the gym like we are 4, 5, 6 times a week, you're just doing some stuff, puts you at below average, but at least it bumps you up into that 25 to 50%, and it starts to cut your risk nearly in half. It's just that important, okay? And then I just say numerous studies, so it's not just him. He's like, if you look at his book at the back part, it's like reams of articles in terms of what he references. So it's not like he's also just pulling that out of thin air. All of this is science-based for him. Being unfit below average at 50% or less, so being unfit, carries a greater risk of death than smoking, diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and hypertension. So all those things that we talk about that are the horsemen, right, that we talked about the other day, the 4 horsemen that, you know, put us at high risk for illness and disease and dying, being unfit puts a bigger risk than those things on our bodies. So it just speaks to the volume, and I just keep trying to tell people, and not even just in here obviously, but people out there, it's just something, like, it's exercise. That's all it is. You don't have to take pills, you don't have to do, you know, great miraculous things. You just have to exercise, and you just increase your longevity and your capacity to live a long, healthy life significantly. It is just so important. Okay, so we talked about VO2, so it is really important in terms of how high my VO2 is going to really determine how long I live. We're going to go over a chart here pretty soon that's going to show how quickly that drops if we don't do something like exercise about it, okay? So the other thing in terms of exercise, so it is your cardiorespiratory fitness, but it is also your muscle mass. So they're the two things, and we talk about that in here when I talk about grip strength and muscle mass and how you have to keep your muscle and how you have to eat protein and all that. It is just so important in terms of muscle, right? So muscle is just as important to longevity as VO2. So you have to be able to do stuff. You have to be able to climb stairs with a lung capacity. So we talked about VO2. So you have to be able to have a good VO2 to climb stairs or to go hike, but you also have to have the ability to do it. So if your legs don't have the muscle and you aren't strength training, then it's not going to matter that your lungs can carry you up the stairs. Your legs will not be able to do it. So it's really important that both things have to happen. So muscle mass / strength. So when I talk about muscle mass and or strength, I mean both of them, okay? So it's not just the size of my muscles, because some people look like they're really strong and might not be so strong. It's really based on force or strength, like how strong are you, is just as powerfully correlated with living longer as is VO2 max. And it is not the size of the muscles that matter, which I just talked about, rather the strength of those muscles. Their ability to generate force is what matters most. Studies have found that those with low muscle mass are at 40 to 50% greater risk of mortality. And a lot of that, and we're going to talk about that, has to do with falling and lack of balance and the things that come with that. People with low muscle strength were at double the risk of death. So yes, we talked about VO2, so how important that is, but then people with low muscle strength were also at double the risk of death. So it puts you in a really bad position if you aren't strong and you don't have the muscle mass that you're supposed to have, and also the VO2. Very similar to VO2 max, the more muscle mass strength you have, the lower your risk of death. There is no other intervention, drugs or otherwise, that rival the magnitude of VO2 and muscle mass strength on longevity. So exercise works as good or better than medicine 2.0. So there was this big study that was done, and he refers to it in his book, where they were like, well, let's just test this theory. So we're saying, you know, exercise is better than even taking medicine and better for you than the medicine 2.0 that's prescribed out there. So they did a study that showed that studies have shown that exercise-based interventions have worked as well as or even better than multiple drugs at reducing mortality from what's the word? Oh my God. That's it, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, pre-diabetes, diabetes, and stroke, okay? So all of those things they did studies on where they showed that exercise actually had better effect than those drugs at reducing the effects of those. So it's not saying it like took diabetes away from you, but in terms of controlling diabetes, it did a better job at controlling heart disease, diabetes, stroke, than the actual medicine that is. And we talked about medicine 2.0, how flawed it is. Medicine is just a Band-Aid, right? So we put that, people are given that by their doctors, and they take the medicine and their blood pressure goes down, or if they don't have as high blood sugars with diabetes, and all that really is just like a little blanket on top of the problem, and the fire just simmers. So that meant that you don't get better. You don't all of a sudden go, oh wow, I don't have diabetes anymore because I'm taking insulin now. No, you have to take insulin the rest of your life. So it just talks about how exercise actually works better than those, and so the study proved that. So why is that? Why do those drugs work better than the actual medicine itself? And they said it's likely due to the improved mechanics what exercise provides. So exercise strengthens the heart and helps maintain the circulatory system. So it makes your heart stronger, which then helps your blood pump better, much better than what medicine would do for something like that, right? Improves the health of the mitochondria. So I'm not going to talk about that because I talked about that last time. If you're not knowing what I'm talking about, you can ask a question or talk to me after. That's a lot to do with the zone 2 benefits, right? So the healthier our mitochondria are, the healthier we are, the longer we live, the better we age. So our mitochondria are the energy sources in our cells. So in terms of how healthy you are, when you exercise, you improve the health of your mitochondria, which improves your overall health. Muscle helps support and protect the body from all of the bad stuff that we're going to talk about, and maintains metabolic health because muscles consume energy efficiently. So muscles do a much better job than medicine in terms of trying to make people healthy, because you're obviously burning energy properly with medicine, with exercise. Exercise also prompts the body to produce its own androgenous drug-like chemicals. So what this is just saying is the body also will produce its own drugs that help the body heal and repair and make itself strong and healthy. So cytokinase sends signals to other parts of our body, helping to strengthen our immune system, stimulate the growth of new muscle and stronger bones. So not only does exercise just help us be stronger, it sends signals to the body. It has these chemicals in the body that actually help. So then those chemicals can tend to work better than the actual chemical drugs that we're taking in pill form, right? And then brain-derived neurotrophic factor improves the health and function of the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that plays an essential role in memory. So those of you that are worried about Alzheimer's, which we talked about as one of the 4 horsemen, exercise helps keep the brain vascularly healthy, meaning good blood flow, which then also helps preserve brain volume, which is all things that help you prevent Alzheimer's. So if you're like going, I still am not like quite sure I believe all this kind of stuff, if you are looking to, and I'm sure all of us are fearful of Alzheimer's, like that to me is just another big, huge reason why you would exercise, because you get this brain-derived neurotrophic factor that happens when you're exercising, which helps keep your brain healthy. Okay, what happens when we age? So as we age, so we talked about all this stuff, but as we age, and we all are going to age, or we all are aging, and we can't do anything about that, so the end game is always getting closer. So as we age, our physical capacity erodes no matter what, right? So we're fighting a fight, which is what I talked about. We're going downhill after about age 30, all of us. It's just how steep is your decline going to be in terms of what's going to happen. So are we going to go at a really slow one like we talked about with Jack LaLonde, or living to 90 and falling off a cliff, or are we going to fall really quick and then have this slow, painful death at the end? So what ends up happening? Our VO2 declines, and we lose strength and muscle mass with each passing decade. So we can do something about that, and that is exercise in terms of trying to preserve that. Without it, we lose a significant amount of VO2 and then a significant amount of muscle mass and strength. Our bones become more fragile, so we all know about osteoporosis, right? Our joints stiffen, so we see that all the time in here, so we keep promoting mobility, which hardly anybody comes to. But it is significantly important, right? Because we just are not as loose as we used to be, and you can feel it every time you get out of bed and how much more you have to stretch before we do stuff in the gym. It's just part of aging. Balance falters. We're going to talk a lot about falling. So balance falters. We start to lose our balance, which is it's important in terms of what we do in here, how much it helps our balance. So some people are, when I'm telling them they should really jump on a box and they should do some certain things, even though they don't want to do them. It's all about how you're grounded and how you're balancing and stable in your life in here, so that you're more stable out there. So our balance starts to falter because we lose muscle mass and we become more fragile, and then our cardiorespiratory fitness declines. By 65, physical activity levels and muscle mass have declined steeply, and by 65, it's as if people just fall off a cliff. And if you look at the studies and you look at the graphs that describe that, It's like you're dropping, and then it's like whoosh off if you have done nothing about it up to that point. So if you don't want the fall off at 75, you have to at 25 and 35 and 55 prevent that. Otherwise, it is just a steep decline by anybody who is not trying to do something healthy for their body. By age 80, the average person will have lost 18 pounds of muscle. That is, like, when I read that, I was like, that cannot be true. Like, think about how much muscle that is. So when I put you on that machine and you're like, you gain like 0.2% of muscle, and I'm just like, wow, that's fantastic, because most of us are fighting a fight to not lose the muscle mass. But think about how much I get excited when you are like half a pound more muscle mass, 18 pounds of muscle mass by the time you're 80. So then when you're looking at the 80-year-olds that really can barely walk across the street, or they have the walker, or you have parents that can't get out of a chair, it stands to reason why they can't. They just don't have the muscle mass to do that. People who maintain high activity levels only lose about 8 pounds of muscle by the time they're 80. So then look at that, like 10 pounds difference. That's unbelievable. That is a huge difference. So if you're active, you're going to only lose 8 pounds, which makes it much more likely that you are not going to end up in assisted living. You're not going to end up in a wheelchair or something else to help you move through your day. Muscle mass and strength helps us survive old age by delaying death because it preserves our health span, which we talked about in that first talk. Muscle mass protects you from all kinds of trouble, even adverse outcomes following surgery, but most importantly, it is highly correlated with a lower risk of falling, which is a leading cause, but often ignored, cause of death and disability in the older population. So how many of us know somebody who had a bad fall, and after that, they just were never the same again? And that's what ends up happening. And sadly, falls are by far the leading cause of accidental death in those 65 and older. This doesn't even account for those who die at 3, 6, and 12 months. The statistics, and I don't have them written down, so I can't quite quote it, but it's staggering. Like something like 50% will, over 65 who fall and have a major fall, will die within soon after. But then even higher, like something like 75% of them will die within 3, 6, 12 months afterwards. So even though they didn't die of their terrible fall that they had at the time, but after their non-fatal fall, so 3, 6, 12 months after their non-fatal fall, but still serious fall, those falls push them into a long and painful decline, which is that slow death, right? And so we all know people, or I think you should, who had that fall and then it was just, that was it for them, right? So elderly people, obviously because of osteoporosis, because of lack of muscle mass, they fall, they break big bones, and it's the femurs and it's the arms and stuff like that, and they just can't recover, and that's the whole slow death for them, sadly. 800,000 older people are hospitalized each year with serious falls. Why are you at risk for falls as you age? Decreased muscle mass, just as simple as that. So decreased muscle mass equals loss of balance and loss of body awareness. So again, it's something in here that we talk about all the time. Balance, spatial awareness. Why do we do cleans and snatches? Because you have to control a bar from the ground over your head, and it's not necessarily so much about the weight. It's like, can you control it, and do you have the spatial awareness to take it from the ground over your head? So it's not just simply the weight, it's just what those movements do for us beyond just lifting some fun weight. It's really trying to keep us balanced and coordinated, to be able to do all the things and keep us balanced in our life. As we physically decline, we usually cognitively and emotionally decline as well. I'm only briefly talking about this. I'm going to try to talk about this a little bit later, but it's not just the physical, and I think again we could all attest to that as you see our aging parents and friends that we see. Studies have shown that those with sarcopenia, which is the age-related muscle mass or loss, were 6 times likelier to report having low quality of life. And part of that, or a lot of that, has to do with you can't do the things you usually did, right? There are the things that when we talk about how do you want to live your life when you're 80 and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can't do any of that now. I'm just sitting on my couch doing nothing because I don't have the strength to do any of it. So they can't go golfing anymore. They can't do the paddleboarding they thought. They can't they can't climb a mountain. They can't look after their grandkids because they just aren't capable of it. So they become depressed. because they can't do those things. They have a hard time socializing with others because they just can't get up and be around. And then that social isolation, there's social isolation due to the falls, the injuries, the lack of strength to move and get out of the house. So again, those falls, not only do they create the physical decline, but it's the cognitive decline too, because now they're laying on their couch, not being able to do any of the things that they used to be able to do. So they become socially isolated. We can avoid all of this though. Physical, cognitive, and emotional decline is not a given, but you have to do the work and it is not easy. So I touched upon this the last class. It's much easier to sit on the couch and order fast food than it is to go to the gym and cook healthy meals. We are a society of that. We have proven that that's what we prefer to do here in the United States. We want to sit on the couch because it's too hard or too expensive or too inconvenient to go to the gym. There's fast food all over the place around us, but you don't have to, you can do something different, right? Be the captain of your own ship. I talked about that. It is really up to you, and it's why people don't do it. It's hard. It's hard to do the things that we do. It's harder, much harder to go to the gym. It's much harder to ride the bike and do zone 2 like I'm asking you to do than sit on the couch and watch your TV shows. It's just harder. It's way easier to eat McDonald's than it is to go shopping and cook. The consequences of not taking action for your own health, though, are dire. The choice is just simply yours. All right, so he talks about the centurion. What time am I? All right, we're pretty close. He talks about the centurion decathlon. So this isn't like, yes, you're going to be 100 years old and you're going to compete in a decathlon. But what it talks about is what would it take for you to be able to compete in a decathlon? And really, he talks about with his clients, with his patients, what do you want your life to look like when you're 80 and 90 years old? And then he gets them to make this list of what do you want? What do you want it to look like? So most of us are going to say, I want to play with my grandkids. I want to walk upstairs. I want to climb. I want to paddleboard. I want to golf. So he does that. So he goes, if you want to run a marathon or an Ironman or compete in the CrossFit Games, and you don't just sign up and go, right? You don't just say, yeah, I think I'm going to do the games next year. It takes a lot of work. So you don't get to just sign up and go run a marathon. I mean, I guess you could, but it probably wouldn't go very well for you. It takes months or years of training to get to that level. If you want to be an elite athlete, then you have to train like an elite athlete. So if you want the VO2 max and the muscle mass and all of that, you have to start training today. It's too late, because we talked about it being very similar to financially saving money. So we have a financial savings account, right? So we save our money for when we retire. And then I talked about how we have to have a health savings account. This is what this is. So if you want to be able to do those things, you have to make deposits when you're 20 and 30 and 40, and then even more when you're 50 and 60, because we're just all declining. We're all fighting a fight. So if you don't make big, huge deposits all along the way, the whole time, then you don't get to compete in the Centurion Decathlon. You won't be at that level, okay? Okay, so some of the things he just talks about that you might want to be able to do. Hike 1.5 miles up a hilly trail. So go for a hike, right? Get up off the floor under your own power. Most of us would say, you know, that's why some people have to wear the little things like help I've fallen, I can't get up. You want to not have to wear that little thing. So I really don't want to wear that little thing on my neck. But so then most of us will say, I don't want to be that person, right? But to do that, you have to get off the ground. So when you hate burpees so much, remember that. They get your ass off the ground. You want to be able to pick up your grandchild or your great-grandchild. We all say that. We'll all say that, right? Of course you want to, but do you know that if your great-grandchild weighs 30 pounds, that means today you have to be able to lift 50 or 60 or 70 pounds, because by the time you're 80, if you can only lift 30 pounds, you're like, oh yeah, I can lift my grandchild. That's when you're 50. If you still want to lift your great-grandchild when you're 70, you won't be able to. If you can only lift 30 pounds today, you certainly won't lift 30 pounds when you're 70. You'll be lifting 10 pounds when you're 70. So then you have to lift more today so you can lift that 30-pound grandchild. You want to be able to carry your bags of groceries 5 blocks, right? We do farmer's carry. Think about that, 5 pounds. But then you see the little old ladies that can barely carry like their little tiny whatever with them because they can't do it. They don't have the grip strength to do it. You want to be able to lift your suitcase into the overhead compartment on a plane. We all want to be able to do that. But think about that. It's a 20-pound overhead compartment, right? Or overhead suitcase. Will you be able to do that? It's not about lifting 20 pounds and going, oh yeah, I can do that today. you would have to be able to lift 60 pounds today so that you can do that when you're 70 years old trying to get on an airplane. So then if you can't do that, can you fly? Is it okay to be able to fly if you can't carry your own luggage? You want to be able to balance on one leg for 30 seconds with your eyes opened, or even better yet, with your eyes closed. That's balance. And so as you probably see with your parents, my mom, I know, certainly couldn't do that. Climb 4 flights of stairs in 3 minutes. So again, if you want to be able to hike, you'll have to be able to climb some stairs, right? And so can you do that? Can you climb 4 flights of stairs today? Yes, but you're gonna have to be able to sprint those stairs today in order to be able to climb those stairs tomorrow. Open a jar. Think about how much grip strength that takes. I talk about it all the time in here. Grip strength is one of the biggest things to determine longevity, because it determines really how strong you are. Do 30 jump rope, which I talk about. Get your feet off the ground, right? And then play 18 holes of golf. So how many people, men, women in here, think they're gonna retire, they're gonna play golf every day? What happens if you can't hold a golf club because you don't have any grip strength, or you don't have the capacity just even to like walk from your ball to the golf cart? You need capacity to do that. So those are things that we would all say, yeah, that's what I wanna do. But again, those things, you have to earn those things. So he just talks about the math on some of those. Let's hear, well, it's already talked about the grandchild. So then we lose muscle strength by a rate of 8 to 17% per decade. So if we do nothing about it and we just are sedentary or we're not active, we will lose muscle strength by a rate of 8 to 17% per decade, accelerating as time goes on. So when you're 40, you're not going to lose nearly as much muscle mass as when you're 60. So if we want to be able to pick up that child, we need to be able to lift a lot more today than so that we can lift what we need to tomorrow, right? If you want to be able to hike up a hilly trail, to do that comfortably requires a VO2 max of a roughly 30 mils per kilogram per minute. If your VO2 max is only 30 today, which we already talked about, most people's is probably even lower than that, but let's say you're like average or just below average, you're 30 today, that means you will not be able to do that tomorrow. That you won't be the same, because you're going to lose 8 to 17% per decade. So at 50, if you don't have a VO2 of 60, not 60, but 50, then imagine you won't have a 30. You won't be climbing anywhere. So if you have a 30 or lower today, you'll be lucky if you can walk down the street when you're 70 years old, okay? Okay, we talked about that. Okay, we talked about that. Okay, so endurance and strength training. So equals CrossFit. Okay, so what we do in here is fantastic, I think. I mean, I guess not everybody would agree with me, but in here we do everything that will help you be healthy and live long life out of here. If you're doing it, hopefully more than 2 days a week, but like 4, 5, 6 days a week. To train for the Centurion Decathlon requires Zone 2 training, which we did not do a lot of that, but I am definitely promoting that, so that's why it's a big part of the challenge. High intensity interval training, we do that all the time in here, so today was a good example. So we are always doing hard, fast intervals or longer, slower type WODs, and then we're doing a lot of strength training. So our week this week is perfect. Like we had one day where we worked without a rep. On Monday we didn't have intervals, we just worked for a certain amount of time. Today we had intervals. Tomorrow we have pure strength. So tomorrow we're just lifting, we're doing back squats and snatches, and so we're just building our strength. So we're doing our strength training tomorrow. So you guys have the benefit of doing all the stuff you need to do if you just come in here and do the work you need to do forever. You'll live a long, healthy life, right? Forever. Yeah. I'll be in here like 90 years old. Okay. The beauty of what we do every day in the gym is that it translates into everything you need to live a healthy 80, 90, 100 years. And it really, really does. CrossFit is 10 general physical. So I looked this up today because I'm like, gosh, I'm pretty sure that a lot of what we're talking about is in these 10 general physical skills that I learned when I first took my CrossFit course. And so here they are. So cardiovascular and respiratory fitness, check. Endurance, check. Stamina, yes. Strength, we're talking about. Balance, again, super important. Flexibility, the power that they talk about that you need in your muscles to be able to live a long, healthy life. The speed, the strength of those muscles. The coordination, doing the stuff that we do in here helps you coordinate so that you can do the stuff out there. The agility and the accuracy. So when you really look at all of that, that is longevity right there in those. How do I have 11. I don't know. Anyways, whatever. I was doing this.
Get excited.
It's been a long couple weeks. Anyways, so, but if you look at that list, and that's what CrossFit, like just the term CrossFit or the company, the headquarters, talked about way back in the day when Greg Glassman was getting CrossFit, you know, as big and doing what he was doing with it. It's really just a recipe for longevity. And so it drives me crazy when there's all the haters out there because it's just not that, seriously. Okay. So VO2 max training, so we're just gonna talk about this. I said that we were gonna talk about this graph quickly. So if you can't see it, just come see it after. I'll try to twirl it. I just have to make sure it's in the shot this time. Apparently it was not last time. So this just talks about our VO2, how our max VO2 declines with age, okay? So that's what this is. So can you still see it?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying, but they're all like trying to see.
see.
Okay, so what this does is it talks about, so this is my max VO2, right? So when I'm 25 and if I'm fit, I'm up here in the 60s, okay? So this line right here, the black line, and then I made them all black and forgot, so there's a red and a blue line. So this line is you've got a high fitness level, 95th percentile. This is your average fitness, so 50th percentile, right? Most people are not above. And then this is below average at 5%. So most people are within this range. I would say, you know, a lot of people that are in here probably are within this range. They might not be here, but they're above average. So this is our VO2 max. This is our age. And then if you want to come and look at all these, you can later. But here it's like to have a high level, a high VO2, run 10 miles per hour here on flat surface. And then if you go down here, it talks about jogging 6 miles per hour. And as you go along, so as your VO2 drops, you're basically walking. You're able to walk 1 mile an hour on a flat surface versus 10 miles an hour up here. You're able to, this talks about the brisk climbing of stairs, and at around 32 or 30, VO2 max is the talking about the climbing the mountain kind of thing. So what this graph is just kind of showing you in sort of a broad form is how much our VO2 drops, okay? So then if I'm here, right, if I'm at 60, let's say I'm fantastic, but now I'm at 55. So here I am here, okay? So then if I want to be able to climb and hike like we talked about when I'm 75, I have to have a VO2 max of 32 to do that, right? So if I'm here on this average line, that's just not simply going to happen for me. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to be down here just in my 20s when I'm 75, which means that I can basically walk a little bit, and that's it. So if you're down here your whole life, you basically can barely walk at that point. But even the people with the high level, you're still going to lose here via some VO2. It's just how rapidly are you going to lose it. So it just talks about how quickly we lose it. We decline no matter what. We're fighting a fight. It just you have to decide, are you going to be up here, which is what I do. I'm trying to train people to be up here. Like if you want to be doing these things when you're 75, you have to be up here. You have to be in this range here, not in this range here, or none of the tough stuff we just talked about is going to be in your future. Okay, so if you want to look at that more closely, you can. That's just what that talks about. I think I talked about that already. Okay, strength training. We're just going to talk a little bit. So we talked a lot about VO2, and then we're done. Okay. Muscle mass begins to decline in our 30s. I talk about that a lot in the gym here. So an 80-year-old man will have, we already talked about that, 80-year-old man will have about 40% less muscle than he did when he was 25, okay? We lose muscle strength, which this is interesting. So we lose muscle strength about 2 times more quickly than we lose muscle mass. So that's why they talked about it's important to have muscle mass, but you can't use that as your full indicator. So if I've got this muscle, but I can't lift anything anyways, it doesn't really matter. I guess I look good in pictures, but that's about it. So we lose muscle strength about 2 to 3 times more quickly than we lose muscle mass. So my strength will deplete more quickly than my muscles will. And we lose power, which is strength times speed. So we talked about that with the CrossFit list there. Speed, right? So we lose power. How fast can we do things? 2 to 3 times faster than we lose strength. And I think a lot of us would probably say, yeah, I just can't jump as high on that box, or I just can't run as fast as I used to be able to run, or I just can't do this as fast. It's because, again, we're aging and we're losing those type 2 muscle fibers. It takes much less time to lose it than it does to gain it, sadly, which is, again, when I put you on the machine, I'm like, you have to do your best to keep your muscle mass. You have to eat your protein. You have to lift, because it's really hard to gain it once you get a certain age. And if you start to lose it, it's really hard to get back, okay? All right, then it does talk, we're just going to talk quickly about inactivity. So in older people, inactivity that lasts for longer than a few days can kick off a steep decline from which we may never fully recover. That is why serious falls in older people tend to be deadly, because they just become sedentary. A study of 12 healthy volunteers around 65 years old, so these weren't elderly people, they found that after just 10 days of bed rest, which is about what a person would experience from a major illness or injury, lost an average of 3.3 pounds of lean muscle mass. So that's not even like an 85-year-old person. That's a healthy person. So as soon as they became sedentary and got put on bed rest, which is what, if you had like broke your leg or something and you had to like lay in bed for 10 days, think about that. 3.5 pounds of lean muscle mass when you're 65, you will not gain that back. You will have lost that much. So it is just, again, that much more important that you maintain your muscle mass, you maintain your balance so you don't break your leg and you don't end up immobile and laying on a couch for 10 days. Okay, so then the last thing we're going to talk about, the movements that are fundamental to building strength. So I put this in here because it just shows what we do in here matters. So grip strength, we talked about. Farmer's carry, we do in here. Dead hang, sandbag carries, barbell movements. You have to be able to hold onto a bar with a whole bunch of weight on it. So to do that, you have to have the strength to do it, right? You actually have to be able to hold that bar. Concentric and eccentric movements, that's the shortening and lengthening of muscles when we're moving, so of our levers. So we squat, we step up, we lunge, we push up, we pull up, etc., etc. Pulling movements, so we do a ton of that. Pull-ups, rowing, cleans, snatches is all pulling, deadlifts, dumbbell rows, ring rows. We do all of that stuff for a reason. They are pulling movements. Hip hinge movements, deadlifts, Olympic lifts, squatting, box jumps, all that. Hip hinge where we're not rounding our back. Those hip hinge movements are fundamental to strength. So all he lists 4 things that need to happen in order to maintain and build strength, and we do all of that in the gym here. So in the end, those that say CrossFit is dangerous have really no idea what CrossFit is. They just, there's probably some dangerous gyms out there, I guess. I don't know. But most gyms, we are just living, we're just doing functional movement, right? And we're just trying to keep people healthy and live a long, healthy life. If done correctly with qualified coaches, it trains us for the Centurion Decathlon. The end. All right, so if you have any questions, I'll answer them. If not, then we're done. Anybody got questions? Yeah.
How do genes play into that? Your parents.
Genes, genetics? I was like, what, like for big thighs, ladies?
Yeah, they better.
It does. It plays into it. So we all are born with like genetics, right? So we have a genetic code about us, and so then lots of us we're all genetically predisposed to certain things, but it doesn't mean we're going to get those things. So if you have a family history of heart disease, then probably you're going to be genetically disposed that yes, you probably will have a better chance of getting heart disease. Because why do some people, get heart disease? Why do some people have diabetes? Why do some people get Alzheimer's? Why do some people have strokes instead of a heart attack? It's just our genetic code for sure. But most of that genetic code is lit up by environment. So then we still get to decide if we're going to have heart disease. Just because my dad died of this, or my mom died of this, or I had heart disease in my family, or there's Alzheimer's, to me that's even more important that you look after yourself, right? So if you have somebody that in immediate family that has Alzheimer's, then you should be doing some work, because Alzheimer's did not used to be what it is today, right? You look back and think, we didn't used to have diabetes the way we're in an epidemic of all this stuff. Diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's. That didn't used to be the way it used to be, but our environment has changed and how we live our life has changed. So we all had those genetic markers. That didn't change. We have not genetically changed. We have not become more flawed or whatever. We've changed how we live our life. So those genetic markers, they become triggered by the environment, by the choices that we make. So they do. There's a factor there, right? Obviously, and then sometimes you just get stuff because you just got the bad
I was thinking about it from the other perspective of like, all the women in that family lived to their 90s.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily out there, killing
Yeah,
it.
so they do. He talks about that a little bit about the centurions,
Yeah.
and they do have, when you look at them, right? They do usually have a genetic code of you're going to live longer. He talks about that you know, people that live longer and aren't out there doing all that stuff. But he said that doesn't mean you're not going to live longer just because you don't have that genetic code that you're going to live longer. It just means it's going to be harder for you, right? So there is, like, how about the guy that, you know, smokes his whole life and dies when he's 95? Things like that drive me crazy when I hear stories like that. But it's true. He just obviously had the code, the genes that was going to allow him to do that, fortunately for him, right? That doesn't mean we go, well, he can smoke, I can smoke. It's not going to work that way. It just means he had a great bunch of genes and he was lucky that way. But then most of us, if we want to, we have to work to do that, sadly. Yeah. Any other questions? So you're just all gonna come and ask me after we turn this off?
Are you gonna be putting on the centenarian decathlon in here?
Right, yeah, I know, that's what I thought. I mean, maybe that'll be the next competition, the centenarian decathlon.
Chuck and I were the centenarians on Saturday.
Yeah, we had a great time it was very good. So hopefully, if you talk to the people that did the competition, they said, yep, it was actually fun and it was doable, and those guys participated and did fantastic. So it does not matter, age, ability, whatever, you get to do whatever.
They can do it, anything.
No, I didn't mean it like that. Okay, if that's it, then we're out.
I think our
Bye.
team proved that kind of